Live. It is 2:30 on the dot. Welcome everybody this beautiful day. Gonna tell you a little bit personal story. This one's all about me, my connection with my Latinx community, trying to get my homework done because I was assigned to do this. So let me just play the intro and we'll jump right in. Here we go.
Practicing Polyamory, real-life perspectives from the imperfect people of polyamory. The mission of the Practicing Polyamory podcast is to provide a platform for all of the real-life, flawed humans that practice polyamory so that we might all learn from one another and grow as a community. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It is a beautiful Wednesday. I'm jumping in here by myself. I had a guest, but she's on her honeymoon today. So, congratulations and enjoy that. But whatever, here we are. We're going to keep on going. If you are joining us here for the first time today, I want to say welcome and thank you so much for tuning in. And if you've been here for a while, then you already know that we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So that's 3 opportunities for you every week to ask some questions. So if you have any questions about your relationships, or if there's a topic you'd like to hear discussed on the show, slide into my DMs, let me know, or leave a comment while we are recording live. Follow the show on all social media platforms at Practicing Polya, and let me know what it is that you want us to talk about. And as always, I want to remind you, if you're listening to this podcast, you are a welcome guest to be on the show. None of us are perfect, and we're here to share our imperfect stories because the more stories we share, the more others will see us in themselves, and the more representation we have, the more we can strengthen our community. So go to practicingpolyamory.com, sign up to share your imperfect story too. Speaking of imperfect stories, I get to tell you some of mine today. What was it, a couple of weeks ago, I think, that I had Olivia Fermi on the show, and I had her twice on here because she was going to help me, or she has been helping me to explore more of my own heritage, to kind of get into this idea of what my heritage means to me and how it is important to creating inclusive communities. And speaking of tomorrow, we have a special episode, a special Thursday episode with a very special guest. I'm really excited about this. Dang, I left it on the kitchen table. But Love's Not Colorblind, author of Love's Not Colorblind, Kevin Patterson, is going to be joining us tomorrow. So we're going to be talking even more about creating inclusive communities. So I'm really excited about that. Oh, thank you. Really, really excited. It's super cool to be getting somebody like that onto the show. So, as I start to kind of get more, passionate and intentional about creating these communities, I want to take a moment and kind of go through and do this homework, right? Do this homework that I was given by Olivia to think about what my connection is to my Latinx community. So I guess I'll start it off just talking about like my own personal identity as Mexican. For the longest time, I don't think that I really identified as Mexican. I mentioned it before that I always used to identify as American. If I ever got a survey and it asked, your race or whatever, and somewhere at the bottom there was always an other option, I would check that other box and I would write in American because I didn't want to be classified as anything else. And especially Mexican, I guess. It sounds horrible when I say it that way, but specifically Mexican. And because of the things that I saw whenever I went to Mexico. So there were, a couple of different reasons why I might go to Mexico as a kid. Now, first of all, I live in San Diego. So San Diego, border town. I mean, we lived 15 minutes from the border. My aunt actually lived in Tijuana, and she would come across the border and she was our babysitter a lot of times. And so I remember as a kid going across the border multiple times with her. We would go to stay at her house for, however long it might be. And one of the biggest things that always stood out to me is that Tijuana is dirty. Like, as soon as we get across the border, it's like, it is a night and day difference from being in the US compared to being in Tijuana, at least. Now, again, this is a border town, and recently I went down to Rosarito with my parents. They actually bought some property down there, so that's kind of a cool thing. But I went down there, and something that I realized is once we get past Tijuana, the rest of Mexico is pretty nice. I was surprised. I was like, okay, I could do this. I can figure this out. Like I wouldn't mind living down here in Rosarito next to the beach, paying half the rent that I do now, like that sounds awesome, actually. But that wasn't what I knew as a kid. That wasn't what I remembered as a kid. I remember it being dirty, and my aunt's house was on this dirt road, like they didn't even pave the streets down there. And of course, I think I talked about this a little bit last time. There's the when we're coming back across the border, there's just all kinds. I mean, first of all, it's filthy, right? Like people just throw their trash everywhere, and it's just gross and it smells. And then yeah, even I could smell it with my bad sense of smell. And then you've got all kinds of vendors coming up to your car, knocking on your windows, trying to get you to buy all kinds of stuff. It was it it was hard for me as someone who was born in the US and who wanted to assimilate and wanted to be accepted, to be proud of my Mexican heritage, when all I saw, all I knew, all I recognized about Mexico is that it's dirty and gross and not somewhere that I want to be. Even on a recent visit that I went, I remember going to we went to somebody's house. My parents were signing the documents for this property that they purchased, and we went to somebody's house, and I excused myself to go use the restroom, and there's like this smell coming from the bathroom. And then we would happen to stop by my aunt's house, and the same house, by the way. She's had the same house for 30 years. And that same smell in the bathroom. So like again, like these memories are triggering, like this is what I remember of Mexico. How am I supposed to be proud of that heritage? That's like it wasn't something that I found a lot of pride in. But being an American, being in an American school, and being indoctrinated, Pledge of Allegiance and America the Beautiful and all of that stuff, this was a country that I was proud of. This is the country that I was taught to be proud of. And maybe it's because I didn't get the history of Mexico. Maybe it's because I didn't go further than Tijuana. I didn't get to see the beauty of the rest of the country. So all of these and the history, the heritage, all of these different things that I didn't get a chance to learn about. I am a terrible reader of physical books. I had a conversation with my friend Tavo after I spoke with Olivia, and he recommended that I get this book, Mexican Americans, American Mexicans, From Conquistadors to Chicanos. So I've had it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm on page 15. Not a very strong reader here, but there's a lot of history that I'm looking forward to learning about once I actually, get into it. One of the things that I remember Tavo talking about was the walkout of this huge, massive, organized walkout of schools in the late 60s by Mexican American students, all in protest of the education level that or the quality of the education that was provided in predominantly Mexican neighborhoods. So their schools. So there's a lot there to unpack and to learn about. But anyway, so going back to like my own connection, my own experience. So I remember, first of all, learning Spanish as my first language. Thank you, Grandma. My Grandma Tonya, who is 93, 92 now. Yeah, she's 92. She just turned 92 last month. Um, and when I was 2 or 3 years old, she had me up in front of the church reciting the 23rd Psalm in Spanish. So like Spanish was actually my first language. But once we started going to school, or even when we were at home, uh, the majority of that Spanish went by the wayside. I was 5 or 6 years old when we moved to from LA to San Diego, and I remember, again, growing up in a religious household, the first church that we went to was a Spanish church. And I don't know, I feel like part of it was the fact that church is boring and I didn't want to be there anyway. But then, like, I feel like I didn't really connect with the Spanish speaking kids back then either. Um, Even though I think my English wasn't perfect yet. When I was in elementary school, when we first moved down here to San Diego, we went to a year-round elementary school. And the way that they did it back then, I don't know what it's like now, but the way that they did it back then, they had 4 tracks. So track A, B, C, and D. And I remember that track B was essentially the ESL track. So it was the track for people who spoke Spanish and were learning English. So I think I did like first grade and part of second grade as in track B in there. And then my parents went bankrupt. So when my parents went through their bankruptcy, us 3 boys, we went different locations. My older brother, he went to LA to stay with my aunt. I went to stay with my grandma, and my younger brother went with my parents to stay in Tijuana with my aunt until they kind of were able to figure everything out. It lasted probably about 6 months, maybe 3 to 6 months. I don't remember, not too long. But long enough for me to have memories of it. When we came back to school, when we got back, all together as a family again, we got placed back in the same school. I went from track B, which was the ESL, to track C, which, as far as I know, was the same as anything else. It wasn't the ESL one. So here I am, back in regular classes, not ESL classes or anything like that, and just keeping up with my peers. We're all speaking English, no big deal. One thing that I do remember, though, even from that age, is my dad. How do I say this? My dad moved us away from LA for a reason. Gangs were very prevalent, very, influential where we were in LA. And so he wanted to get us away from that gang culture. And, he didn't want us to associate with gangs at all. As a kid, we weren't allowed to slick our hair back because that's what the cholos do. So cholos is like your Mexican gangsters. I actually saw this video. One of my partners sent me this video recently about Japanese women that are dressing like cholas. So if you're bored and you want to Google that, go ahead and check that out. That was an interesting little 15 minutes of fun there. But the cholo mentality, that gangster mentality, was very, very, very frowned upon in our family, in my upbringing. Ironically, my little bro, he kind of went that cholo route, but yeah, in our home, put that up later. In our home, that was very frowned upon. It was very taboo to want to be or to idolize that in any way. So something that I've learned recently is that part of the Cholo mentality, part of that mindset has a lot to do with Chicano. So Chicano is like this mix, I guess. It's the acceptance of this Mexican American heritage. It's in a lot of ways it's what's the word that I'm looking for? It's antithetical, whatever. It's like anti-establishment even, of what America has done to the Mexican, to Mexicans in Southern California, taking the land and all of that. And so Chicanos is very much, um, anti all of that. Chicanos are, really love like the Aztec. There's this picture, this very famous picture of like an Aztec warrior carrying this nude woman, and this is like part of what makes the Chicano like culture. But we were, as kids, we rejected all of that. We were told that that stuff is no bueno, like I went Mexican there. It's not good. We don't want to go that way. It was very much about, I guess, whitewashing in a way. Chicano is a political statement. Thank you, Tavo. And by the way, Tavo, we're going to be talking on the show next Thursday. So another very special episode where we're going to be learning even more, because Tavo is the one who recommended this book, first of all, and very, very smart guy. Really looking forward to chatting with him next week. But anyway, so like I said, a lot of ignorance on my part, and rejection of the heritage, rejection of the culture. So growing up, I start to think about, as I'm reflecting here, I started to think about the different portrayals of Mexicans in the media. The first thing that I thought of was one of my favorite movies as a kid, Blood In, Blood Out. I can't remember if that's actually what it's called, but I think that's the shortened version of it. But Blood In, Blood Out, revolves around these cousins. One of them is very, very light skinned, so white passing. But they call him Milkweed because he's white on the outside, but he's brown on the inside. Anyway, great movie. But it was very much, there was a lot of gang violence even in that movie. So like when I think of Mexican portrayal in movies, I start to think of gangs and gangsters and cholos. Think about the movie Fast and Furious. You remember the Mexican guy in there? Some big, cholo with the mustache and, like the Dickies shorts and the socks up to their knees. When I was a kid, what do you mean, Nino? Anyway, Nino, one of my best friends from high school. So there's one. Then I think of Danny Trejo, one of the like most famous Mexican actors in the world. What up, Robbie? How you doing? I think of more recently the Mayans in Sons of Anarchy. I don't know if you guys have seen that. There's but again, all of these things, Blood In, Blood Out, Fast and Furious, the Mayans, Danny Trejo, very much like gang related stuff, which is all what we were taught to reject over and over and over again. Perhaps one of the best Mexican portrayals in media was James Edward Olmos. What was the name of that movie? Non, you might remember. Stand something. Anyway, it was this movie about him.
Stand and Deliver.
Stand and Deliver. Thank you, sir. This movie about him taking this high school class and teaching them math and like this whole new way, and it just changes everything. So like James Edward Olmos, great, Mexican actor, and really, something maybe that I could feel like I could strive for. But now when I look to like Mexican uh portrayals in media, the first thing that comes to my mind is Luis from the Marvel movies, from Ant-Man, right? And the funny way that he talks and the stories that he tells, and all of that stuff. But like, none of that is me. It's hard for me to like really truly resonate with that stuff, because again, it's a lot of the stuff that I was rejecting and taught to reject. So what is my connection? What actually is my connection? The things that I've been thinking about, the things that I've concluded are, first of all, I'm one generation away from being illegal. I'm one generation away. They let you watch Bound by Honor. Oh, yes. Yeah, man. I watched that movie when I was like 10 years old, something like that, 12 years old. I don't know. Young, way before high school. Um, so I'm one generation from being rounded up and detained. I'm one generation away from dealing with the same struggles that a lot of people are still dealing with today. This is something that I'm, not that I'm ignorant of it, but it's easy to brush off. It's easy not to think about. I remember, oh man, I remember having a conversation with my cousin Jessica, man, years and years and years ago. I think she was like a sophomore in high school. So, I but she was always like wicked smart. I mean, this is the girl that was the what do you call it? The valedictorian, got the Bill Gates scholarship, went to Stanford, went to uh, wicked smart cousin of mine. Anyway, so even back then, I was like rejecting a lot of this connection. And I remember her telling me one time, "What do you think that sweatshops still don't exist? Do you think that we got rid of that? Do you think that we just like ended all of those things?" And at the time, I was like, "Well, yeah." And she's like, "No, dummy. Like this stuff is still going on. All of this stuff is still happening." And so when I think about the struggles of people today, you know, I recognize that I am one generation away. I'm lucky that my grandma brought my mom and her siblings over. I'm lucky that they came over multiple times, even though they were deported. Tavo says identity politics are a finicky thing and changes with time. Even though we think of it as a finite thing, it's quite fluid, even if we reject and deny it. Totally true. Totally true. And I think, part of this journey for me is coming to terms with my identity. Um, I don't remember what it was. It was some other survey that came up recently, um, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it did ask about race or heritage or whatever. And for maybe the first time ever, I wrote Mexican. I was like, yeah, I'm Mexican. Uh I need to accept it, and definitely not reject it, because I this is where I come from. This is my family struggled to get here. My grandpa worked under the table for pennies, and people are still doing that. People are still out here in strawberry fields, right? And just picking one thing out of many, but working under the table for pennies and forcing their children to assimilate as well. Like I talked about before. Thank you again, Tavo, for this phrase, assimilation as a weapon. Because when those children of those immigrants don't assimilate, it just brings unwanted attention, and it's that much easier for somebody to make that call to ICE or something along those lines. The other question that I was asked by Olivia: how would my life be different had I not been born American? Being born American gave me a ton of opportunity and privilege. Um, I had, I mean, I think my family life probably would have been very similar. Mom and dad loved us, cared about us, took great care of us. Um, you know, like I said, grew up in the Brady Bunch, and I don't think that necessarily any of that would have changed. But what would my dad have done? Oh, thanks, Tara. I would love to chat with you too. Go to practicingpolyamory.com and sign up. Would love to chat with you some more. So what would my dad have been doing for work? The reason why my family came from Mexico into the US is because there was more opportunity here. There are just not as many opportunities in Mexico. I went to pick up some prescriptions from Mexico the other day. For the very first time, I rode my motorcycle down there. It was scary as hell and freaking thrilling and so much fun, and I can't wait to do it again. Actually, I can wait. I don't think I'm going to, but it was fun. Uh, however, um, so my cousin wanted me to meet her like right as I crossed the border. There's like this little driveway, this little turnout that I just like just as soon as I cross in, just make that quick left and boom, that's where we're gonna meet. I said, okay, no problem. So I get in there and I make that left and I'm getting all the stuff together and she's writing out the prescription so that I can take it back across the border, all this good stuff. And I start to look around and I realize I'm in a tent city. There are rows and rows of tents. I am not kidding you. There had to have been 100 tents at least right there, right on the other side of the border. And, once we finally, got all of that business taken care of and I was following her out so I could make my way back to the line, back to the border to get back across. I'm going through that whole thing and here's little kids running across, they're playing. Somebody's got like this extension cord that's coming from one of the buildings nearby and they've got, their devices charging and all this stuff, but it's a tent city. Would my family have been in a tent city? How would we have lived? I mean, would my dad, my parents, they were hardworking, but would they have had the opportunities that they had here in the States? Would I still be living in Mexico? My income, the way that I earn money is because I own an insurance agency. Is insurance even required in Mexico the way that it is here in the US? Can I build a business that way? What are the business opportunities down there? Would I have read the books that I read? Would I have had the time, or would I have had the inspiration to read books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, The Richest Man in Babylon, Cash Flow Quadrant? Would I have gone there, or would I have just been, hey, I gotta make money because I support my family. I'm gonna find every way that I can. I'm gonna go. Would I have had the same education, be it school or entrepreneurial? Would I have had these same opportunities? And I venture to think that no. My life would be completely different. I live such a privileged life here in the US. We all do. The poorest among us here are better off than, a lot of people in just on the other side of the border. And I don't know, that's one of those things that I'm having trouble letting go of, in the sense that like, this is where I come from. This is where I come from. This is, the country of my heritage, not my specific origin because I was born here, but it is where my family came from. And they came here get away from all of that. So I don't know. That's about it. I'm coming up on the 30 minutes here, so I'm going to end it. Olivia, if you check out this episode, I hope that I have answered your question. I know that we talked about you coming back. I would love to chat with you again. Don't forget, as I mentioned, I'm going to be interviewing Kevin Patterson tomorrow, who is a leading expert in creating inclusive communities, especially in polyamory. So tune in tomorrow, 2:30 for a special Thursday episode. Thank you to everybody who commented. Thank you to our live audience for tuning in. As a reminder, when we're live, you get no commercial interruptions, but the same can't be said for those podcast downloads. So if you want to avoid the commercial interruptions, catch us live Monday through Wednesday, 2:30, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch. Or sign up for Patreon, where you'll get access to our commercial-free RSS feed and support the show. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, wherever it is that you download your podcast, if you haven't already. And please leave us a review. We'll really appreciate it. That is all I've got for you all today. Thank you again for tuning in and hearing me rant and rave about my own heritage. Until next time, hope you all
have a nice day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Practicing Polyamory podcast. Would you or someone in your polycule like to be a guest? Sign up at practicingpolyamory.com and join the conversation. Please support us by subscribing, liking, and following us on social media at Practicing Polya by clicking any of the affiliate links on our website or by subscribing at patreon.com/.